Nowadays, when we think about Jamestown's legacy and success, the cultivation of tobacco is the first thing that comes to mind. However, that was not the original plan. England's affinity for looting, piracy, and high-seas hijinks was the motivation behind not just Jamestown, but most early English colonies. Today, we're going to explore the early English colonization efforts and the long-held English hope of a pirate nest in the New World. In order to understand Jamestown's role, we have to back up a bit into England's 16th century attempts to create colonies. Throughout Queen Elizabeth's rule, England and Spain had developed a bitter rivalry that stemmed in large part from the economic success that the Spanish had seen from their exploitation of North American natural resources. While Spain and Portugal had successfully built empires that spread through multiple continents, England had struggled to gain power over their only overseas holding, Ireland. Notable names like Sir Walter Raleigh were among the English gentlemen who were involved in the bloody conflict to exert English control over the island and its people. What the English excelled at during this period was naval conflict. British pirates like John Callis, a former naval officer, had successfully raided foreign vessels up and down the British coastline. Sir Francis Drake, another famous English seafarer, gained his notoriety not just for circumnavigating the globe, but also wreaking havoc on Spanish ships throughout Central and South America. But to be truly lucrative, pirates needed partners in crime on land. Cities like Cardiff, Norfolk, Suffolk, and Dover became what historian Mark Hanna has termed pirate nests. These pirate-friendly communities on land helped to traffic the stolen wares from vessels to consumers. The English government was not officially on board with these activities, but often they let them slip through the cracks because Privy Council members financially benefited from access to these stolen goods. Over in the Caribbean, there were Spanish galleons regularly carrying boatloads of precious, valuable goods like gold and silver, and for the English to successfully bring their pirate enterprise across the Atlantic, they needed a base of operations. As early as 1577, gentlemen like Sir Humphrey Gilbert wrote to Queen Elizabeth asking for a land patent in North America, writing her a document that laid out his intentions, quite clearly titled, How Her Majesty Might Annoy the King of Spain, under pretense of a voyage of discovery, and so fall upon the enemy's shipping, destroy his trade in Newfoundland and the West Indies, and possess both regions. Gilbert would eventually get his patents in 1578, but his efforts to land colonies in Newfoundland and the West Indies ended in disaster that resulted in his own death at sea. The patents would eventually transfer in the 1580s to his half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh, the driving force behind the Roanoke colony. Another prominent figure of the time advocating for English colonization was Richard Hakluyt the Younger, an eventual investor in the Virginia Company of London and Jamestown. Hakluyt wrote a treatise entitled A Discourse on Western Planting, which detailed a variety of reasons in favor of English colonization. In this document, he asserts that, quote, the planting of 2 or 3 strong forts between Florida and Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, would endanger Spain's fleet in the return thereof, but also in few years put him in hazard in losing some part of Nova Hispania. Hakluyt wrote this document in 1584 to help garner support for Raleigh's efforts in the newly christened Virginia colony. What Hakluyt proposed was similar to Humphrey Gilbert's line of thinking. Establish a colony within sailing distance of the West Indies and Newfoundland, and use it as a base of operations to raid Spanish ships during fishing seasons up north and other times in the south. Exploratory missions to Virginia bringing small groups of colonists began in 1584. Sir Francis Drake, meanwhile, was relentlessly pillaging Spanish ships all around the West Indies. In 1586, him and his crew made a short stop at the Roanoke colony to pick up the initial colonists from Virginia and transport them back to England. Another ship coming back from Roanoke in 1587, the Tiger, actually detoured south and raided a Spanish ship, the Santa Maria. It sailed back to London with a prize haul containing thousands in Spanish gold and silver, and over 100 tons of sugar, animal hides, and spices, proving the location's worth and likely earning enough in one haul to make back the initial investment of the colony. However, the Roanoke colony was fraught with issues, ranging from supply ships being derailed by detours to plunder farther south, to strained tensions with indigenous groups in the region. Eventually, Roanoke would become known as the Lost Colony, with the disappearance of the colonists brought to live there in 1587. With the commencement of the Anglo-Spanish War in 1585 and the threat of Spanish invasion in the British Isles, English colonial efforts would be put on hold until Queen Elizabeth's successor, King James, would sign a peace treaty with Spain in 1604. These negotiations included a promise to cease any further efforts to colonize in North America, but it wouldn't be long until Englishmen would set foot in Virginia once again. The hopes of building a pirate haven across the Atlantic did not die with the Roanoke colony. In fact, many of the most important and influential people in Jamestown's early founding were heavily involved with the privateering culture that had continued to operate under King James's rule, albeit more discreetly following an official peace with Spain. Even the leader of the fleet carrying the colonists to Jamestown, Captain Christopher Newport, was a legendary privateer and merchant who had already made numerous voyages across the sea to gain his fortune stealing from the Spanish. Bartholomew Gosnold, Gabriel Archer, and John Martin, all leaders in the Jamestown colony, served under Raleigh or Drake on various voyages. Thomas Gates, one of the original investors in the Jamestown colony and the eventual governor in 1610, served on Sir Francis Drake's Caribbean voyage in 1586. Documenting their journey and stop in Roanoke. Raleigh Gilbert, Sir Humphrey Gilbert's son, was one of the established leaders of the short-lived Popham colony in modern-day Maine that shared a charter with the Jamestown colony. Even Admiral George Somers, one of the eventual founders of the Bermuda colony in 1610 after the wreck of the Sea Venture en route to Jamestown, was a privateer who had ties to Raleigh's attempt at colonizing Guyana in 1603. This trend continued not just from the early days of the colony, but into the Virginia Company's later years, partially contributing to the company's eventual demise. By 1619, Jamestown Colony had finally started to turn a corner. The Virginia Company, on the other hand, had not. The company had not turned a profit since its inception, and even reorganization under the Great Charter of 1618 was not enough to fix things. The situation was not helped by Samuel Argall and Robert Rich, two very wealthy investors in the colony who were determined to make it the base of their privateering operations in the West despite tobacco's profitability. This included the 1619 arrival and subsequent prosecution of the Treasurer and its crew, carrying stolen goods and captured Africans, much to the chagrin of both men, who were patrons of the ship. King James was not thrilled with the prospect of having his finally successful colony sullied by piratical activity, and eventually infighting combined with losing favor with the king resulted in the dissolution of the Virginia Company and the creation of Jamestown as an official royal colony. England had finally managed to create a profitable colony, but only after the success of tobacco farming, something they never could have predicted when they first arrived in North America. Ultimately, privateering and piracy was the Virginia Company's downfall, but it would not have existed in the first place if not for the English dream of a pirate nest in Virginia. Thank you for learning with us today. I hope this video sparked your interest in the early English colonial efforts and their connection to piracy. If you would like to dive deeper, some of the primary resources used for this video will be linked below. I encourage you to take a deeper dive into these documents to see what they can tell us about the people of the past. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and leave a comment letting us know what you would like to see next. From all of us here at the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, thanks for watching.